Hi, this is Kurt. I'm speaking to my world literature class. I thought I'd just spend a few minutes giving a recap of the works that and really my discussion of the works that we've talked about thus far for the sake of those unable to attend my one or more of my lectures for any given reason, whatever that may be. Anyway, so we looked at the Epic of Gilgamesh first of all, and with that, you see, as the documentary on the bibliography indicates, an individual's questioning of essentially the meaning of life, search for immortality, so on and so forth, and you've got just a number of episodes there. You've got some interesting dynamics between men and women. You have human sexuality being commented upon and depicted in some interesting ways. Really, though, for me, the most interesting character is Enkidu, because he is the first of many what I like to call hairy sidekicks. If we look throughout world literature, you're going to see a lot of these. The most obvious counterpart to Enkidu, or mirror of Enkidu, or doppelganger of Enkidu, probably would be, or double of Enkidu, uh, would be Hanuman from the Ramayana. Hanuman, like Enkidu, is kind of the partner, the sidekick to Ram in the Ramayana. He too is of divine descent, just like Enkidu. Um, he has lots of powers that enable him to have adventures and so on and so forth. And he typifies loyalty, friendship, etc., in much the same way that Enkidu does. Um, so then we move to medieval China, and we get Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong is the sort of naughty version of Hanuman. He's a stone monkey who, through lots of hijinks, achieves immortality, and ultimately goes on a journey and becomes the sidekick to a monk who is trying to recover some ancient texts to bring enlightenment to China. And so, in so doing, he kind of learns about himself, learns to quell his uh, baser nature, I suppose. Um, this story, the Journey to the West, is what the story with Sun Wukong is called. Is so beloved in China and in the East in general that it makes its way ultimately into popular culture with any number of manga and anime based on this. Um, because China and Japan are constantly borrowing from one another. It's kind of an uneasy cultural exchange, has been for hundreds of years. But what you have is you have Sun Wukong becoming, most notably, Son Goku in Dragon Ball. And of course, that, he gets brought over to the West, and the young Goku that we see in the Japanese version of Dragon Ball, until very recently, was somewhat muted in the American version. The Goku, urinating off mountains and so forth, has been added back in, thankfully, because Funimation has realized that there's some profit to be made in that, and that fans want that. But our Western version of Enkidu, the most prominent Western version of Enkidu, is my favorite which is Chewbacca. Um, Chewbacca very much is the Enkidu, or the conscience, or the Jiminy Cricket, if you will, to Han Solo. Um, and Interestingly, I'm not going to give away the latest Star Wars film, because some of you probably haven't seen it yet, Star Wars 7. But there's a slight twist on the Gilgamesh outcome, with Enkidu's outcome in Gilgamesh. It happens. Chewbacca fares a little differently. Chewbacca and Han Solo fare a little differently. So that's kind of interesting. So then we discussed the Odyssey, and the Odyssey is one of these quintessential Western stories. Along with Shakespeare's Hamlet, it's probably one of the clearest stories championing the idea of individualism. You know, the gods like Odysseus because he tends to solve problems using his wits. But, you know, one has to wonder how reliable the narrator is of the Odyssey. If there's more to Odysseus than the narrator is telling us. For instance, Odysseus, as most of us know, having read the Odyssey very early on, 13 or 14, you know, middle school, even, or younger than that. If you read it in the 6th grade, you'd be, you know, reading it at like 10 or 11. But Odysseus finds himself on the island of Polyphemus the Cyclops, right? And he goes in, and he and his men are drinking Polyphemus wine, eating his cheese. Polyphemus comes in, threatens to kill them, tells him his name is No Man, and so forth. And Odysseus hatches a scheme to blind Polyphemus, and thus be able to get out of the cave. Everybody knows that story. But think of it from the Cyclops' point of view. You know, the Cyclops is a pastoral guy. You know, he's herding his sheep and so forth, and all of a sudden this guy comes in and takes his wine and cheese and you know, blinds him, attacks him in his own home. So in essence, from the Cyclops' point of view, Odysseus is an insurgent. You know, that sort of riff, right, demonstrates the essence of postmodernism, right? Postmodernism says, as Chuck D put it, you know, don't believe the hype. In other words, look below the surface, look beyond the surface, look past exactly, you know, what you're being told, and look to see if there's something else that's maybe happening off camera, off screen, off the page, that's implied but maybe not necessarily discussed. This is the basis for deconstruction. This is the basis for feminist criticism, African American criticism, post-colonial criticism, and so on. This idea of what's really going on, and also in tandem with that, who has power, how is it being used, and so on. Are the ones who are assumed to have power really the ones who wield power? Okay, for instance, if we look at the Odyssey again, look at the character of Penelope, right? She is Odysseus' long-suffering wife. Perhaps there's far more to her than we get simply just from the reports. If you think about how this person must be in the story, first of all, Odysseus is having quite a bit of good fun with Calypso for 7+ years on her island. Had Penelope done something similar even once, she would be considered defiled, right? She would be considered disloyal to Odysseus. So she's, in essence, celibate for 20 years. She is not a trained warrior, right? So she cannot defend herself and her son from the onslaught of suitors. These suitors that essentially show up to try to take Odysseus' place and claim his land and assets and so on and so forth. Particularly once the other kings from the Trojan War begin returning, she can't fight them off. She's not a trained warrior, but she uses these skills that she has. She uses her mind. Okay, in that regard, she's Odysseus' equal, if not superior, because she makes this proposal that she is going to weave a death shroud for Odysseus' father, thus doing her duty as Odysseus' wife before she chooses one of the suitors as a husband, thereby allowing her to unravel the shroud every night and prolong this for many years. The reason that this is so ingenious in part is because she's playing on the suitor's patriarchy to get what she wants, because her identifying herself as a dutiful wife, she's a dutiful wife under their patriarchy, right? So if she honors Odysseus as a husband, as a wife honoring a husband, and to the degree that she would honor the potential death of his father, Penelope is going to honor whatever suitor she chooses all the more, or at least that's what she wants them to think. And so Penelope's an interesting character. She also, she doesn't slay anybody in the story, as Odysseus does. But her grand victory, of course, is again a victory of wits, of rhetorical exchange. She is able to determine who Odysseus is by asking a question with regard to secret knowledge that only she and Odysseus would share, right? So she is potentially, as brilliant, if not more so, than Odysseus. Also, if we look at it from a feminist perspective, we look at the role that Athena plays. Athena is really the one that tells Odysseus to stop. In the end, he and Telemachus are ready to go, ready to kill the suitors' families. She says stop. It's enough. So, there's any number of ways that you can read this. And the next piece that we covered, and this I really thoroughly enjoy this story. There's a stage production of it in your bibliography that you can look at. But Chile slays the serpent, or also called Ichi slays the dragon, by any number of names in English. But this is the same scenario as the Penelope scenario. This is, and this kind of pulls on our heartstrings somewhat, and in fact, this scenario is the kind of thing that we like. We like heroic people who step out on a limb and make sacrifices, because there's no greater sacrifice than one who would sacrifice his life for his friend, so on and so forth, right? Well, this is the Chile scenario is the Hunger Games scenario, right? So we know that there's this dragon who has been wreaking havoc in this the kingdom of Yu, the mountains, and they've sent armies of men out after the dragon. The dragon defeats all of them, and so the dragon strikes a deal with the folks and says, hey, I'll take one sacrifice of one young girl a year, and I'll leave you alone. So for 9 years, they sacrifice young girls. It comes to the 10th year. And Chi Li's father has, I believe it's 6 daughters, maybe 5. You know, I'm not a numbers guy, but in any case, Chi Li is the youngest daughter, and she says, I'm just a mouth to feed. You know, why not? I'm just a girl. I'm just a mouth to feed. Why not let me volunteer to do this? So again, she's playing on the presupposition of the patriarchy that she's weak, that she doesn't matter, right? She goes to the magistrate and asks the magistrate for 3 items, right? Or 2 items really, a sword, and she wants to take her pet dog, family dog. Okay, again, the magistrate says, okay, it's not going to do you any good, but okay. And in the magistrate's mind, well, this is just a foolish girl, so on, right? Um, she also, of course, she defeats the dragon ultimately, and I don't mean to spoil the thing, but she defeats the dragon with rice balls and a dog. Okay. Uh, and the skill of making rice balls and so on and so forth, these are quote unquote female skills, right? She is only able to kill the dragon because he's distracted by the dog and by the eating of the rice balls. So, it's her ingenuity that allows her to defeat the dragon, and it's ingenuity that she develops and skill that she develops as a female. Okay, that's what makes this story so interesting. Um, especially that it came from, it's an old Chinese tale. So that's that's a that's that is a kind of a remarkable piece for that reason. Um, Listen again. You know, I bring up a lot of literary theory in class and all that sort of stuff. There are explanations of the primary literary theories that I reference in doc sharing in PowerPoint form, so you can look at those and and just try to get the background on those. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. I'd be more than happy to you know uh, um, further the discussion as needed. Um, okay, thanks. This is Kurt.